The stars looked peaceful from the observation deck of the mining colony on New Dakota. Jake Morrison had been watching them for the past hour, enjoying the quiet night shift. He liked these moments when nothing happened and he could just think about his family back on Earth. His coffee was getting cold, but he did not mind. The universe felt calm tonight. Then the alarm went off. Jake jumped from his chair and ran to the control panel. His heart was beating fast as he looked at the screen. 3 unknown ships had just appeared at the edge of the system. They were big, much bigger than any human ship he had ever seen. The computer was already trying to identify them, but Jake knew what they were. He had seen the briefings. These were Krethian warships. He grabbed his communication device and sent an emergency message to Earth. His hands were shaking a little, but his voice was steady. This was what he had trained for, even though he had hoped this day would never come. On Earth, deep inside the Terran Defense Command Center, Lisa Hayes was drinking her 3rd cup of coffee when the message arrived. She was tired from a long day of paperwork and routine checks. Nothing exciting ever happened anymore. Humanity had been at peace for 30 years. They kept to themselves, far away from the rest of the galaxy. That was how they liked it, but now everything was changing. Lisa read Jake's message twice, making sure she understood it correctly. Then she stood up and walked quickly to the communication room. She needed to wake up the Admiral. She needed to activate Protocol 7. Her stomach felt tight as she thought about what this meant. Protocol 7 had never been used before. It was the code for war. Admiral Henry Carter was sleeping in his quarters when the call came. He was 70 years old now, retired from active duty for almost 3 decades. He had spent those years training others, writing reports, and trying to forget the terrible things he had seen during the last human war. He had hoped he would die peacefully, never having to fight again. The communication screen next to his bed was flashing red. Henry knew what that meant before he even opened his eyes. He got up slowly, put on his uniform, and answered the call. Lisa's face appeared on the screen. She looked worried. They crossed the line, Lisa said. 3 Krethian ships entered the buffer zone. They ignored all our warnings. Jake Morrison from New Dakota sent the alert 15 minutes ago. Henry felt old and tired. He looked at his reflection in the dark screen for a moment. The man looking back at him had gray hair and deep lines on his face. He looked like someone's grandfather, not a military commander, but he had a job to do. Activate Protocol 7, Henry said quietly. Begin evacuating the forward colonies, get everyone to safety, and wake up the fleet. Lisa nodded and ended the call. Henry sat on his bed for a few minutes, his head in his hands. He thought about all the promises humanity had made. They had promised the galaxy they would stay away. They had promised to keep their weapons quiet. They had promised to be peaceful, but the galaxy, it seemed, would not let them keep those promises. Far away, in the command ship of the Krethian Third Fleet, Admiral Vorak was studying the human colonies with interest. He had been a soldier for 40 years and had conquered many worlds. He knew what weak prey looked like. These humans were definitely weak prey. His scouts had sent back detailed reports. The human colonies had minimal defenses. Their ships were small and slow. Their weapons were primitive. They had no shield technology worth mentioning. Vorak had faced tougher resistance from civilizations that had not even discovered electricity yet. How many colonies are there? Vorak asked his intelligence officer. 12 major settlements, sir. Total population about 8 million. They seem to be focused on mining and agriculture. No significant military presence that we can detect. Vorak smiled. 8 million new subjects for the Empire. Resources to fuel the next wave of expansion. And best of all, it would be easy. He could probably take all 12 colonies with just the ships he had right now. Send a message to Imperial Command, Vorak ordered. Tell them we have found a new territory ripe for conquest. Request additional ships for occupation duty. We will begin operations within 48 hours. What Vorak did not know, what his scouts had not discovered, was that humanity had been hiding for a reason. They had not retreated to this quiet corner of space because they were afraid of other civilizations. They had retreated because they were afraid of themselves. Back on New Dakota, Jake was helping coordinate the evacuation. Families were packing quickly, taking only what they could carry. Children were crying, not understanding why they had to leave their homes. The adults tried to stay calm, but Jake could see the fear in their eyes. Everyone knew the stories about the Krethian Empire. They had heard what happened to worlds that resisted. How long do we have? A woman asked Jake as she carried her young daughter toward the evacuation ships. Maybe 2 days, Jake answered honestly. But we are getting everyone out. You will be safe. The woman nodded and kept walking. Jake watched her go and felt angry. These people had done nothing wrong. They had built their homes here, far from everyone else just wanting to live in peace. Now they were being forced to run because some empire decided it wanted their world. Jake's communication device beeped. It was a message from Lisa Hayes, just 2 words. Fleet activated. Jake smiled for the first time since the alarm went off. The Krathians thought they were attacking defenseless colonists. They thought this would be easy. They had no idea what was coming for them. In orbit around Earth, massive doors were opening in facilities that had been hidden under the ocean for 30 years. Inside those facilities, ships were waking up. Not the small mining vessels or transport ships that the Krathian scouts had seen. These were warships. Real warships. The kind that humanity had built when they were fighting each other. When they were trying to survive against an enemy that knew all their tricks. Admiral Henry Carter stood in the command center, watching as ship after ship reported ready for duty. Each one was a reminder of humanity's darkest days. Each one represented lessons learned in blood. Each one was a promise that humanity had hoped never to keep. Status report, Henry said to his operations officer. 200 ships ready now, sir. Another 500 coming online within 12 hours. All crews are reporting for duty. Everyone remembers their training. Henry nodded slowly. 200 ships. That would be more than enough for 3 Krathian vessels. But he knew more would come. The Krathians would not stop after losing one small fleet. They would send more. They would send everything they had, and humanity would be ready. The Krathian fleet had grown larger. What started as 3 ships was now 12. Admiral Vorak felt confident as he looked at the display showing his forces. 12 heavy warships, each one capable of reducing a city to ashes. The humans would have no choice but to surrender. His communication officer interrupted his thoughts. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from a human vessel. It is requesting to speak with you. Vorak was amused. Were the humans going to beg for mercy already? That would save time. He had planets to conquer and a schedule to keep. Put it on screen. The display showed a human male in a simple gray suit. He looked calm, which Vorak found interesting. Most species showed fear when facing the Krathian Empire. This human just looked tired. I'm Ambassador Kyle Peters of the Terran Union, the human said. His words were translated perfectly into Krathian. You have entered sovereign human territory. This violates the treaties established with the Galactic Council 30 years ago. You must withdraw immediately. Vorak laughed. The sound echoed through the bridge of his ship. His crew joined in, finding the humans' demand hilarious. A species with 12 small colonies was ordering the Krathian Empire to retreat. This was the funniest thing Vorak had heard in years. Ambassador, Vorak said when he stopped laughing, the Krathian Empire does not recognize your authority. We do not care about your treaties or your council. These worlds belong to us now. You have 2 choices. Surrender peacefully or we will take them by force. Those are your only options. Kyle Peters had expected this answer. He had studied the Krathians for months, preparing for this moment. He knew their history, their tactics, their pride. He knew they would not listen. But he had to try anyway. That was his job. Admiral Vorak, Kyle said slowly. I need you to understand something important. Humanity chose to isolate itself. We chose to stay away from the rest of the galaxy. This was not because we were afraid of other civilizations. It was because we were afraid of what we might do to them. Vorak stopped smiling. There was something in the human's voice that made him uncomfortable. It was not fear. It was something else. Something like sadness mixed with warning. Kyle continued. 30 years ago, humanity finished a war against itself. We fought for 20 years. We used weapons that should never have been created. We did things that we can never take back. 7 billion of our people died. 7 billion. When the war finally ended, we looked at what we had become and we were horrified. The bridge of Vorak's ship had gone quiet. Everyone was listening now. We made a choice, Kyle said. We decided to remove ourselves from galactic affairs. We limited our expansion. We hid our military. We did this to protect the galaxy from us, not to protect us from the galaxy. Do you understand what I am saying, Admiral? We have been trying to keep you safe. Vorak felt his confidence returning. This was just a trick, an attempt to scare him with stories. Every weak species tried something like this when faced with superior force. You expect me to believe that you are dangerous? Your colonies have no defenses. Your ships are outdated. You have nothing that could threaten the Empire. Kyle Peters closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, he looked directly at Vorak. I am authorized to tell you what the Galactic Council already knows. Every major civilization in the galaxy received the same warning we gave them 30 years ago. They saw what we showed them. They saw recordings of our war. They saw what we did to our own cities, our own people, and they agreed to leave us alone. He paused, letting his words sink in. You are being given a choice that we never gave our last enemies, Admiral. Turn your ships around and go home. Forget you ever found us. Live your life. Or continue on this path and discover why the rest of the galaxy calls us the sleeping predators. This is your only warning. For just a moment, Vorak hesitated. There was absolute certainty in the human's voice. Not bravado or false confidence, but the calm assurance of someone who knew exactly what would happen next. It made Vorak uncomfortable in a way he did not like. Then his pride took over. He was a Creathian admiral. He did not run from threats, especially not from a species that could barely defend a dozen colonies. This was clearly a bluff, and he would not fall for it. Your warning is rejected, Vorak said coldly. You have 1 hour to begin evacuating your colonies. After that, we will take them by force. Any resistance will be met with total destruction. Kyle Peters nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer. Then I am sorry, Admiral. Sorry for you, sorry for your crew, and sorry for what is about to happen. I tried. History will show that we tried. Enough of this, Vorak snapped. Weapons officer, destroy that ship. Let us show these humans what happens when they waste our time. The weapons officer looked uncomfortable but followed orders. A bright lance of plasma shot across space and struck the small diplomatic vessel. It exploded instantly, leaving nothing but scattered debris. Vorak felt satisfied. The humans would know now that he was serious. They would know that their threats meant nothing. He would take their colonies, add them to the Empire, and move on to the next conquest. Just another day's work. Set course for the first colony world, Vorak ordered. Prepare landing forces. We will begin occupation within 6 hours. But something was happening that Vorak could not see. Deep under Earth's oceans and facilities built during humanity's darkest days, machines were coming to life. Reactors that had been cold for 30 years were warming up. Weapon systems were running diagnostics. Crews were boarding ships they had only trained on, hoping they would never have to fly them in actual combat. Admiral Henry Carter stood in the command center of the Terran Defense Fleet headquarters. He had just watched Kyle Peters die on the screen. He had known the ambassador for 15 years. Kyle had a wife and 2 kids back on Earth. They did not know yet that they would never see him again. Henry felt very old and very tired. He had hoped this day would never come. He had spent 3 decades working to make sure humanity never had to go back to war, but the Crithians had made their choice. They had been warned. They had been given every chance to walk away. Now they would face the consequences. Send the activation codes to all fleet commanders, Henry said quietly. Recall all personnel on leave. Cancel all shore operations. As of this moment, the Terran Defense Fleet is at war. His second-in-command, Commander Lisa Hayes, stepped forward. Sir, are you certain? Once we do this, there is no going back. The galaxy will know what we are capable of. Our isolation will be over. Henry looked at her. Lisa was young, only 40 years old. She had been born after the war, had grown up in the peaceful era. She had studied the history, watched the recordings, but she had never seen real combat. She did not know what it was like to order people to their deaths. They killed our ambassador, Henry said. They ignored our warnings. They are preparing to invade our colonies. We gave them every chance, Lisa. Every possible chance. Now we do what we must. Lisa nodded and started sending the orders. All across human space, military personnel were getting the call. Some were on leave visiting family. Some were in the middle of training exercises. Some were sleeping. But all of them responded immediately. They had trained for this. They had hoped it would never happen, but they had trained anyway. The Creathian Empire had no idea what was coming. They thought they were about to conquer some weak colonies. They thought this would be easy. They were wrong. Admiral Vorak's fleet entered the New Dakota system expecting an easy victory. His 12 warships moved in formation, their weapons ready, their shields at full power. The scouts had reported that the colony had minimal defenses. Maybe a few orbital platforms with light weapons. Nothing that could stop a Krethian battle group. The first sign that something was wrong came from his sensor officer. The young Krethian was staring at his display with confusion on his face. "Sir, I am detecting unusual energy readings throughout the system." "Multiple sources. Very powerful signatures," Vorak frowned. "What kind of energy readings? Are the humans trying to power up some hidden weapons?" "I do not know, sir. The readings are unlike anything in our database. They are very strong and getting stronger. They are appearing all around us." Before Vorak could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. Ships appeared. Not the small transport vessels or mining ships his scouts had reported. These were warships. Real warships. And there were so many of them. The Terran battleship Roosevelt materialized directly in front of Vorak's fleet, flanked by 20 destroyers. Each ship was massive, bristling with weapons, their hulls covered in armor that looked like it could withstand anything. More ships were appearing every second, surrounding the Krethian fleet in a perfect sphere. Captain Susan Blake sat in the command chair of the Roosevelt, watching her displays with calm efficiency. She was 50 years old and had spent her entire adult life training for a war she hoped would never come. Now it was here and she felt surprisingly calm. This was what she had prepared for. "Weapon status," Susan said quietly. "All railguns charged and ready, Captain. Missile tubes loaded. Point defense systems online. We have firing solutions on all enemy vessels." Susan nodded. She opened a communication channel to Admiral Carter back on Earth. "Sir, this is Captain Blake. We are in position, awaiting your orders." Henry Carter's face appeared on her screen. He looked sad and determined at the same time. "Captain Blake, you are authorized to engage. Rules of engagement are clear. No prisoners, no survivors. We need to send a message that the galaxy will understand." Susan felt her stomach tighten, but she did not let it show on her face. "Understood, sir." Roosevelt out. She looked around at her crew. Most of them were young, born after the last war. They had trained in simulators, studied history, learned tactics, but this was their first real battle. She needed to be strong for them. "Fire control," Susan said clearly. "You may engage at will. Show them what they have awakened." The Roosevelt opened fire and the battle began. The human weapons were beyond anything the Krethians had ever encountered. Railguns accelerated metal projectiles to incredible speeds, turning them into relativistic kill vehicles. When they hit Krethian shields, they did not slow down. They punched straight through as if the shields were not even there. Vorak's flagship shuddered under multiple impacts. His shield display showed the barriers collapsing under sustained fire. "What is happening?" he shouted. "Our shields should be stopping those weapons." His tactical officer was frantically checking readings. "Sir, they are using kinetic weapons at relativistic speeds. The projectiles have so much energy that our shields cannot dissipate it fast enough, and their targeting is perfect. Every shot is hitting weak points in our shield geometry." Another impact rocked the ship. Vorak could hear explosions somewhere in the lower decks. He looked at his fleet display and felt cold fear grip his heart. 6 of his ships were already gone, just gone, erased from existence in less than 2 minutes of combat. The human destroyers were launching missiles now. But these were not normal missiles. Each one seemed to have its own intelligence, dodging point defense fire, working together to overwhelm Krethian countermeasures. When they hit, they released antimatter warheads that turned ships into expanding clouds of plasma. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Vorak ordered. "Return fire! Destroy these humans!" But the Krethians could not hit what they could not target. The human ships moved with precision that should not have been possible for vessels that large. They anticipated every move, dodged every shot, and their own weapons never missed. It was like fighting an opponent who knew what you were going to do before you did it. Because that was exactly what it was like. Humanity had spent 20 years fighting the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy, themselves. They had fought against opponents who knew all their tactics, all their weaknesses, all their strategies. They had refined their military doctrine in the fires of total war. The Krethians, for all their conquered worlds, had only ever fought weaker opponents. Commander Lisa Hayes watched the battle from Earth, monitoring all the communications and sensor feeds. She had studied military history her whole life, but nothing had prepared her for this. The human fleet was not just winning. They were dominating. It was not even close. "Admiral," she said to Henry Carter, "the Krethian fleet is trying to retreat." Henry shook his head. "Do not let them. We need to make this lesson very clear. No survivors. Lisa felt uncomfortable with the order, but she understood the logic. If even one Crethean ship escaped to tell a story of honorable combat or brave resistance, others might be encouraged to try again. The message had to be absolute. Attacking humanity was not just dangerous, it was suicide. She relayed the orders to the fleet. Human ships moved to block every escape route. The Cretheans were trapped in a kill zone, surrounded by predators who had been designed to hunt and kill anything that moved. Vorak made one last desperate attempt. He ordered all his remaining ships to focus fire on a single human destroyer, hoping to overwhelm its defenses with concentrated firepower. For a moment, it seemed to work. The destroyer's shields flared bright under the assault. Then 20 other human ships opened fire on Vorak's fleet. The concentrated return fire was devastating. 3 more Crethean ships exploded. 2 more lost all power and drifted helplessly. The destroyer they had been shooting at did not even have a scratch on its hull. Its shields had absorbed everything and were already recharging. "Sir, we have lost 10 ships," Vorak's executive officer reported, his voice shaking. "Recommend immediate retreat." Vorak knew it was over. They had walked into a trap. No, worse than a trap. They had poked a sleeping monster and now it was awake and angry. All remaining ships emergency jumped to hyperspace. Scatter formation. Go now. 2 Crethean ships managed to activate their hyperspace drives. They vanished, escaping into the safety of faster-than-light travel. But the other ships were not so lucky. Human weapons tore them apart before they could jump. The battle had lasted 18 minutes. Of the 12 Crethean warships that had entered the system, only 2 survived. And they survived only because the humans let them go, wanting someone to carry the message back to the Empire. On the bridge of the Roosevelt, Captain Susan Blake watched the last enemy ship explode. She felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a deep sadness for all the lives that had been wasted because of one Empire's arrogance. "Cease fire," she ordered. "All ships begin search and rescue operations." "Check for survivors." "Captain," her sensor officer said, "there are no survivors. The Crethean life support systems failed when their ships were destroyed. Everyone is dead." Susan closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Understood. Send a report to Admiral Carter. Tell him the perimeter is secure." "Mission accomplished." She paused, looking at the debris field floating in space. Pieces of ships, frozen bodies, the wreckage of what had once been a proud fleet. All of it waste. All of it unnecessary. "And tell him we should have stayed hidden," she added quietly. Back on Earth, Admiral Henry Carter received the report. He read it carefully, noting every detail. Then he stood up and walked to the window of his office. He could see the ocean outside, peaceful and calm. It was hard to believe that just a few hundred miles away, under that water, the largest military fleet in human history was preparing for the next battle. Because this was not over. The Cretheans would not accept this defeat. They would come back with more ships, more weapons, more determination. And humanity would have to face them again. Henry thought about all the promises they had made, all the years of peace, all the effort to be better than they had been during the war, and now it was all coming apart because one species had refused to listen to a simple warning. He picked up his communication device and sent a message to all fleet commanders. "Prepare for full-scale conflict. The Cretheans will return in force. We need to be ready." Then he sat down at his desk and began writing letters to the families of the crew members who had died in the battle. It was his responsibility as commander. He would tell them that their loved ones had died protecting humanity. He would tell them that their sacrifice mattered. He would not tell them that it had all been so preventable, that all those people would still be alive if the Cretheans had just listened, that the galaxy had been warned and the warning had been ignored. Some truths were too bitter to share. Emperor Thask of the Crethean Empire did not believe the first reports. He was in his throne room when the news arrived, surrounded by his advisors and military commanders. When his intelligence chief told him that an entire battle group had been destroyed by humans, Thask actually laughed. 12 warships defeated by colonists? Thask said, his voice filled with disbelief. "That is impossible. There must be some mistake in the reports." His intelligence chief, an old warrior named Dracos, shook his head sadly. "Sire, we have confirmed it with multiple sources. 2 ships escaped and are returning to Imperial space. The crews report that the humans had advanced weapons and many ships. They were completely overwhelmed." Thask stopped laughing. He had ruled the Crethean Empire for 20 years and had personally led campaigns on 40 different worlds. He knew what military power looked like. He knew when his people were lying to avoid punishment and when they were telling the truth. Dracos was telling the truth. How many human ships? Thask asked. The survivors report at least 40, possibly more. All of them military vessels with advanced weapons systems. The humans destroyed our fleet in less than 20 minutes. The throne room went silent. Every advisor and commander was thinking the same thing. If the humans could destroy 12 ships that easily, they were much more dangerous than anyone had thought. But Thask did not become emperor by backing down from challenges. Assemble the Grand Fleet, Thask ordered. Every available warship. I want 300 vessels ready to move within 1 week. We will crush these humans and show the galaxy that no one defies the Crethean Empire. Dracos looked worried. Sire, perhaps we should reconsider. The humans warned us. They said we should stay away from their territory. Maybe we should honor that warning. Thask's eyes turned cold. Are you suggesting that the Empire should run away because some humans destroyed one small fleet? That would make us look weak. Every species in the galaxy would think they could challenge us. No, we attack with overwhelming force. We show everyone what happens when they resist the Empire. The order went out. Across Crethean space, ships were recalled from occupation duties. Crews were pulled from leave. Weapons were loaded and supplies were gathered. Within days, the largest armada in Crethean history was assembled. 300 warships led by Grand Admiral Korath, the most experienced military commander in the Empire. But while the Cretheans prepared for war, something else was happening. The Galactic Council, which governed diplomatic relations between hundreds of species, was having an emergency meeting. The council met in a massive space station that orbited a neutral star. Representatives from 40 different civilizations gathered in the Great Chamber, their various forms of life creating a strange and beautiful display. Some were solid beings like humans and Cretheans. Others were energy forms or collective consciousness. But all of them were worried. The speaker of the council was a being called Zephix, a member of the ancient Luminar race. Zephix existed as pure energy contained in a crystalline structure. When it spoke, its voice came from all directions at once, translated simultaneously into every language. Members of the council, Zephix began, we face a crisis. The Crethean Empire has attacked human territory. The humans have responded with military force. We all know what this means. A representative from the Vorlan Collective, a species of insectoid beings, spoke up. The humans have been peaceful for 30 years. Why are we concerned about their military response? They are simply defending themselves. Zephix's crystal form pulsed with urgency. Because you do not remember what we saw 30 years ago. Some of you are new to the council. You were not here when humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel. You did not see what they showed us. The central display in the chamber activated. It showed archived footage that made several species recoil in horror. Human cities burning under nuclear fire, orbital bombardments that cracked continents, biological weapons that dissolved living tissue, chemical attacks that poisoned entire planets, and worst of all, humans fighting humans with a ferocity that seemed impossible. This is what humans did to themselves, Zephix continued. They fought a war that lasted 20 years. 7 billion of their own people died. They used weapons that we banned thousands of years ago. They fought over resources, territory, and ideas. Things that civilized species negotiate about, humans went to war over. The footage continued. It showed human soldiers fighting in ruined cities, using weapons that could vaporize entire buildings. It showed space battles where fleets destroyed each other with terrible efficiency. It showed the final days of the war, when exhausted survivors finally agreed to peace simply because there was no one left to fight. An elder representative from the Cygnus Republic spoke. I remember this presentation. I was here 30 years ago when the humans came before the council. They asked for isolation, not for their protection, but for ours. The display changed, showing a younger Admiral Henry Carter standing before the council. His uniform was different then, marked with the insignia of the Earth Defense Forces. He looked tired and haunted, like someone who had seen terrible things. Members of the council, the younger Carter said in the recording, my species has just survived the worst war in our history. We have looked into the darkness of our own nature and found something that terrifies us. We are very good at killing. We are creative, adaptable, and relentless. We learn from our mistakes quickly and we never give up. He paused, and even through the recording, his pain was visible. We developed weapons during our war that we hope no other species ever creates. We refined tactics designed to fight an enemy that knows everything about us. We became efficient at destruction in ways that should not be possible, and when the war finally ended, we realized something horrible. If we take these capabilities into the galaxy, if we ever go to war with another species, we could do to them what we did to ourselves. The younger Carter looked directly at the council members. We are asking for isolation. We want to limit our territory, reduce our military, and stay far away from the rest of the galaxy. This is not because we are afraid of you. This is because we are afraid of what we might do to you. Please give us this. Let us be forgotten. Let us heal and learn to be better. For the sake of the galaxy, let us stay away. The recording ended. The council chamber was silent for a long time. Finally, Zephyx spoke again. The council agreed to the human request. We established the exclusion zone. We told our people to avoid human territory, and for 30 years the humans kept their promise. They stayed isolated. They limited their expansion. They turned their weapons inward, using them only for defense. They tried to be better than what they were during their war. Zephix's form flashed with urgency. But the Crethians have broken that peace. They ignored the exclusion zone. They attacked human colonies. And now the humans are no longer bound by their promise. They are defending themselves. And if the Crethians send their grand fleet, the humans will destroy it. And then what? Will they stop? Or will they decide that isolation is impossible? That the galaxy will not leave them alone? That they must ensure their security through conquest? A younger representative, a floating jellyfish-like creature from the ether depths, asked the question everyone was thinking. Can the humans really defeat 300 Crethian warships? Zephix's response was immediate. The humans can defeat 3,000 Crethian warships. They can defeat every military fleet in this chamber combined. They have been preparing for war against themselves for thousands of years. They know how to fight enemies who are just as smart, just as creative, and just as desperate as they are. The Crethians only know how to fight weaker opponents. They have no idea what is coming. The council erupted in discussion. Some representatives thought they should intervene, try to stop the Crethian fleet before it reached human space. Others thought they should stay neutral, let the Crethians learn their lesson. A few suggested that they should prepare their own defenses in case humanity decided to expand after defeating the Crethians. But while the council debated, time was running out. The Crethian Grand Fleet was already moving toward human territory. Grand Admiral Korath had his orders. He would crush the human resistance and claim their worlds for the Empire. Korath was confident. He had 300 ships. Even if the humans had surprised Admiral Vorak, they could not possibly stand against this much firepower. This would be over quickly, and he would return home a hero. He had no idea that he was leading his fleet to their deaths. He had no idea that the humans had been building ships for 30 years, preparing for a war they hoped would never come. He had no idea that what Vorak had faced was not humanity's military. It was their mercy, and mercy had limits. The Crethian Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human territory, like a swarm of angry insects. 300 warships, the pride of the Empire, arranged in perfect battle formation. On the command deck of his flagship, Grand Admiral Korath felt satisfied. This was power. This was strength. The humans would see this fleet and understand that resistance was pointless. His sensor officer provided the tactical report. Sir, I'm detecting human ships ahead. Approximately 40 vessels in defensive positions around the outer colonies. Korath smiled. 40 ships against 300. The humans were either brave or foolish. Probably foolish. Open a communication channel. Let me speak to whoever commands their forces. The display activated, showing an older human male in a dark blue uniform. The name tag identified him as Admiral Henry Carter. The human looked tired, and there was deep sadness in his eyes. Grand Admiral Korath, Carter said, his voice calm and steady. I am authorized to offer you the same choice we offered Admiral Vorak. Turn your fleet around and go home. Leave our territory and never return. If you do this, you and your crews will live. If you continue, you will discover why the galaxy fears us. Korath laughed. Admiral Carter, you are badly outnumbered. You have 40 ships. I have 300. You have two choices. Surrender now, and your people will be allowed to live as subjects of the Empire. Resist, and we will destroy every human colony in this region. Choose wisely. Carter closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they held something that made Korath uncomfortable. Not fear, not anger, just a terrible certainty. like someone watching a tragedy unfold that they could not prevent. "Then I am sorry," Carter said quietly. "Sorry for you, sorry for your families, and sorry for what is about to happen. We tried. History will record that we tried." The transmission ended. Korath felt a moment of unease, but he pushed it aside. The human was trying to make him nervous with words. It would not work. "All ships, prepare to engage. Destroy the human fleet." That was when something impossible happened. The space around Korath's fleet lit up like a star-going supernova. Energy signatures appeared everywhere, so many that his sensors could not count them all. And ships materialized. Not 40 ships, not 100 ships, thousands of ships. The human fleet dropped their stealth fields all at once, revealing what they had been hiding for 30 years. Battleships the size of cities, carriers launching fighter wings that numbered in the hundreds, destroyers that bristled with enough weapons to level planets, cruisers with armor so thick they looked like flying fortresses, and in the center of it all, the flagship Washington, a vessel so massive that it outweighed Korath's entire fleet combined. "How many ships?" Korath whispered, his voice shaking. His sensor officer's voice cracked with panic. "Over 2,000, sir. And those are just the ones we can detect. There might be more still hidden. Sir, their weapon signatures are off the scale. Each one of those battleships has more firepower than our entire third fleet." Korath felt cold fear grip his heart. This was not possible. How could the humans have hidden this many ships? How could they have built such a fleet without anyone knowing? Captain Nicole Grant commanded the destroyer Kansas, one of the smaller ships in the human fleet. She was 35 years old and had never seen actual combat before, but she had trained for this her entire adult life. She knew what to do. "All weapon systems online," her tactical officer reported. "We have firing solutions on multiple enemy vessels." Nicole opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Kansas Actual. You have your orders. Engage at will. Show them why we stayed away." The human fleet opened fire and the battle became an execution. Korath's ships tried to fight back, but it was useless. Human weapons tore through Krethian shields like they were made of paper. Railguns firing relativistic projectiles that could not be dodged or stopped. Missiles with guidance systems so advanced they could predict evasive maneuvers before the enemy ships made them. Energy weapons that could punch through meters of armor in seconds. But worse than the weapons was the coordination. The human ships moved like a single organism, each one supporting the others, creating overlapping fields of fire that gave the Krethians no safe place to maneuver. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. A dance of death choreographed with mathematical precision. "Sir, we have lost 50 ships in the first 5 minutes," Korath's executive officer reported, his voice shaking. "Our weapons are barely scratching their shields. Sir, we need to retreat now." Korath wanted to refuse. He wanted to order his ships to fight harder, to find a way to win. But he was not a fool. He could see the battle display. His fleet was being systematically destroyed. Every tactic he tried, the humans countered instantly. Every formation he ordered, they broke with ease. It was like fighting an enemy who could read his mind. Because in a way, they could. Humanity had spent 20 years fighting itself. They knew every tactic that intelligent beings might use in combat, because they had used all those tactics against each other. They had fought enemies who thought like them, who were just as creative and desperate. The Krethians, for all their experience conquering weaker species, had never faced an opponent like this. "All ships," Korath ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Emergency retreat, scatter formation, jump to hyperspace immediately." But Admiral Carter was not going to let them escape so easily. "Pursuit fleet, engage. Do not let them regroup. Hunt them down and destroy them." Human ships broke formation and chased the retreating Krethians. It was not a battle anymore. It was a hunt. The humans were faster, better armed, and they knew exactly where the Krethian ships would try to run. They picked them off in small groups, preventing any organized retreat. Korath's flagship was one of the few ships to make it to hyperspace. As he watched his fleet being destroyed on the sensors, he felt a horror he had never known before. 300 ships, 300 crews, thousands of soldiers, all dead or dying because he had been too arrogant to listen to a warning. The battle lasted less than an hour. Of the 300 Krethian warships that entered human space, only 23 survived. And they survived only because the humans decided to let some ships escape, to carry the message back to the Empire. The message was simple: never attack humanity again. On the bridge of the Washington, Admiral Henry Carter watched the battle end. Around him, his crew was silent. There was no celebration, no cheering. Just quiet efficiency as they began recovery operations and damage assessment. Commander Lisa Hayes approached him carefully. "Sir, the Galactic Council is requesting to speak with you. They want a meeting as soon as possible." Henry nodded slowly. He had been expecting this. "Tell them I will come to the Council station within the week. And Lisa, send a message to all human colonies. Tell them that the war is effectively over. The Crethians cannot sustain any more losses. They will have to sue for peace." Lisa hesitated. "Sir, what about us? What about humanity? We just revealed everything we were hiding. The galaxy knows what we are capable of now. Everything we worked for, the isolation, the peace, it is all gone." Henry stood up from his command chair and walked to the observation window. He could see the debris field, the wreckage of hundreds of ships, the frozen bodies floating in space. So much death, so much waste, all because one species had been too proud to listen to a simple warning. "We tried, Lisa," he said quietly. "We tried to stay away. We tried to keep our darkness to ourselves. But the galaxy would not let us. They pushed and pushed until we had no choice but to push back. Now they know the truth. Now they understand why we asked to be left alone." He turned to face her. "Send another message to the Council. Tell them that humanity wants peace, but we will defend ourselves if attacked. Tell them that we hope to return to isolation, but we will not be driven from our own territory. Tell them that we are not conquerors, but we are also not victims." Lisa nodded and went to send the messages. Henry returned to looking out the window, watching the cleanup crews work. Ships were collecting debris, recovering bodies, securing the area. It would take days to finish the job. The war with the Crethian Empire ended 6 weeks later. Emperor Thask, faced with the complete destruction of his military forces, agreed to unconditional surrender. The Crethian Empire, which had stood for 3 centuries, was dissolved by order of the Galactic Council. Their conquered territories were returned to their original owners. Their military was disbanded completely, and humanity, which had tried so hard to stay hidden, became the most feared military power in the galaxy. The Galactic Council met with Admiral Carter and established new treaties. The exclusion zone around human territory was tripled in size. No military vessels from any species were allowed within 50 light-years of human space, without explicit permission. The Council formally apologized to humanity and recognized their right to absolute sovereignty. But the most important change was in how other species viewed humanity. They had seen the recordings of the battle. They had seen how easily the humans destroyed a fleet that could have conquered most civilizations. They understood now that humanity's isolation had been an act of kindness, not weakness. Admiral Henry Carter retired for the 2nd time in his life. He returned to